All right. There are four commissioners present, and it's 5:31, so I think we can go ahead and get started with the pre-meeting for the February 21st, 2020.
Recording in progress.
Should I go ahead and start over? All right. Welcome to the pre-meeting for the Planning Commission, West Jordan, February 21st, 2023. We have four commissioners here with Commissioner Shelton and Commissioner Quinney both absent. Commissioner Quinney has been excused. Have we heard anything from Commissioner Shelton? Okay. And the mayor just stepped out. Do we have an update on a seventh member yet? Or heard anything?
I know that he has several applications that have come in, but he has not indicated if he's settled on anyone in particular.
Okay. Yeah. Well, it's good to have a lot of input and options, right? So, okay. Well, I know we've got training today. Maybe just before we step into training, are there any agenda items that anybody has a particular question about and would like an update? Okay. I guess we'll just talk about it all in the primary meeting and give the entire 30 minutes over to Duncan.
Okay. Not sure I'll take the whole 30 minutes, but I'm sure you'll have some good questions too. Of course, you know that the Open and Public Meetings Act training is required by law, right? So we have to do it. But it is really important, right? Because it's a fundamental opportunity for people to participate in the public process, and especially in their local government meetings, and show up to public hearings or just listen in, right, to meetings. That's really the main gist of the Open and Public Meetings Act, is that people have a right to show up and listen and watch. And then there is at least some degree of participation allowed when there is a public hearing or if there's a public comment period and so forth. Because of course, public bodies, whether it's the City Council or the Planning Commission, they're doing the people's business, right? And so you're taking actions openly and doing your deliberations openly. There are some exceptions with closed meetings and so forth, not generally applicable to planning commissions, but so that we always want to go back to what is that intent and what's the main purpose of the act, right? So I gave you a little handout. You probably had a chance to look it through. What I wanted to start with is just some hypotheticals, right, that might use some of these ideas. And I'll throw a hypothetical out there and then just ask some questions and see what you think in applying these principles that you've learned and other trainings through in the past. That's kind of the method that when you go to law school, you learn something called the Socratic method. And what it normally is you're in a first year contracts or torts class or whatever, and the professor either takes half of the hour or the entire hour focused on one person, asking him about the facts and the law and how it was applied in a given case. And it's really intimidating, right? But so I won't be that intimidating. I'll just throw a hypothetical out there and not just pound the heck out of one of you for a long period of time. But one day I was arguing a case in front of the state Supreme Court, and I was a new attorney, and it was the first time I was there on oral arguments. I'd only submitted on the briefs before. And, I was up against the county attorney's office of the county I was in, and they hired a big law firm, and I'm like, oh my heck, I'm this new attorney, and I was just so intimidated. And I got halfway through, and I realized, oh my heck, I'm somewhat good at this, How did that happen? And it was because of that Socratic method thing, right? And the only difference is instead of one professor, well, it'd be five if it's the whole court. It was a 3-judge panel, but I basically had like 3 professors, right, pounding me with questions. And usually you'd get half done with answering one question before the next one hit you with a question. So that was new to get used to. But at any rate, hypotheticals are a great way to learn, right? So the first one, though, is not really a true hypothetical because it really happened. But the other day in council meeting here, there was a work session, a committee of the whole meeting, and there were 3 land use issues on the agenda. In their work sessions, there's no public hearings, right? So, and there's no public comment period, and there's really no regular method for somebody to talk or raise a question other than the council themselves or if they call on staff. But there were these 3 different land use applications that were getting started, hadn't worked their way to you here in the Planning Commission yet, I don't think. And, but it was clear that some of the applicants who are in the audience wanted to say a couple of things about their project as it was being presented by staff and looked at by the council. And so the council was thinking through, well, gee, do we want to hear from this first land use applicant that's, coming up? And if so, how do we do it? And, especially where we don't have a, in their rules, they don't really, and the way it was set up on the agenda, there was no way for each applicant to give a presentation. So what do you think they did, or what would be a good thing to do in that situation? Yeah.
Tell them to come back.
Okay.
I mean, I guess, and this is probably, and correct me if I'm wrong, as long as they're not making any type of decisions, then they could probably go ahead and have that dialogue as long as there was no decisions being made as a group. However, with that being said, I would guess that just being in the 100% pure transparency probably would not be a good idea.
Okay. Any other ideas that people have? Because keep in mind, it was noticed for discussion and getting it's an opportunity for staff to get input from the council. They're obviously not going to take any final actions, right? Because it has to go back to the Planning Commission anyway, and then to the council for action. Other ideas?
I would say, if they apply it to one, they have to apply it to all, and I would let them have their moment to add info and then accept it and move on.
Okay, so two thoughts you had there. One is the opportunity to be heard is a good thing, which is part of the Open Public Meetings Act. Those certain situations where we do want the public input, especially if it's a major application. Then you mentioned a second thing, which is being equal and fair and equitable and giving everybody that's similarly situated an opportunity, right? So, okay. What other thoughts do you guys have? Those are great comments. And essentially, they went through all the same thought processes that you just described. And ultimately, what they decided to do was, since a 3-minute comment period is pretty usual, right? They gave each applicant 3 minutes, each the exact same amount of time. And they let them strategize at what point they wanted to do their 3 minutes, either after the council deliberated amongst themselves a little bit, or during or after. Yeah, before or after, basically. And I think most of them waited till after they talked, so they knew enough about what the council was, what the information they needed, and they each gave their 3 minutes. And because a lot of times, we can work things in within our rules, but you're right, we want to be fair and equitable and apply the same rules equally to similarly situated people. And I thought they did a great job, and it worked out really well. And I think all the applicants felt like they were heard, right? Don't you think, Scott? You were there. And I think it allowed, and I think it accomplished the purpose, because the stated purpose of those committee of the whole work sessions is to get input from the council, allow the staff to know what a majority of the council wants, help the developer decide, or the applicant, do they want to move forward with that application? And if so, do they want to change something because of the comments they received? I think it's fair to the applicant too, because, some of these projects are expensive, and even just some basic engineering to show up to a council work session might be $20,000, right? But before they get $100,000 into it, it's probably good to know that, well, wait a minute, this direction doesn't appear to have the approval of the majority of the council, and this is a special zone. I mean, this requires a special development agreement, it requires a zone change, and it doesn't make sense to move forward if they're not going with where the majority of the council is going, or if they want to move forward with the project and they think they can convince the council, great. But the idea is then it's more likely that people can make fully informed decisions based on more information, right? And so the way that they did that, I thought it worked out really well. So here's another hypothetical. So somebody comes in to, say, this planning commission meeting tonight, and they have a video recorder and they want to video part of the meeting or the whole meeting. The problem is they start interrupting people at the podium, or some of you as planning commissioners when you're talking, or they're standing in between the podium and the planning commission. What is good about that fact pattern? What isn't? What does the law allow or not? What are your thoughts?
I think if it's disruptive, then I wouldn't allow it. However, I think it's okay to, videotape or whatever the meeting, as long as it does not interfere with everybody conducting the businesses.
Okay, good. Well, dang it, I thought you'd discuss more before you went right to the complete correct answer. But, but yeah, I mean, that's really it, right? The law says, and logic would dictate too, right? That sure, you can record as much of the meeting as you want, but of course you don't have the right to disrupt the meeting. So you just quietly wherever you want without being disruptive to the meeting. And obviously, if somebody, well, I guess maybe the follow-up part would be, what would you do? We've talked about what the law is and what's optimal. What would you do though if somebody did that? How would you handle it to get the meeting back into proper form? What would the chair do? Highly skilled and plenty of experienced chair.
You'd have to come over the intercom, such as this. Please ask the individual to respect the process and the individuals making comment. And I think first a warning, and then if it continues, have them escorted out of the meeting.
Right. Because obviously, I think 90% plus of the time, people just don't know that that's a rule, right? And then if they're politely told what the rule is, they'll comply. But you're right, ultimately, that according to state law and rules, if something ever did really reach that point, there are ways that someone could be removed from a meeting. But
Duncan, since we already record these on YouTube, could
Yeah.
we not at least just say, if you, need to watch this in depth, here's the link?
yeah, as an additional option, you can, there's another play. Absolutely. I think that's great.
Duncan,
Yeah.
another question. If Chairman Ammond did that and the disruption continued and the person refused to leave, would it be appropriate to say, to move for a meeting to be adjourned?
Well, or you could, there's actually a provision in state law if somebody made a motion to expel that person from the meeting after you tried all the other things first and it was passed by a majority vote. And if there was someone present, like a police officer, to remove them, then that's one way you could do it too. So, yeah, never seen that happen, but in theory it could.
I think in my duration on the council, I think we've only had one meeting that got a little, out of all the meetings,
Yeah.
that got a little out of hand. So it's not something that happens often.
And I think that's the one time I saw something almost happen. I was in another city, a small city, and somebody said something really inappropriate and was threatening to hurt someone in the open meeting and so forth. And just the police chief standing up and moving towards that person stopped the comment without him having to do anything. Of course, the chief had a taser and a gun and club and like 2 or 3 other weapons, and so most people are smart enough to stop. But yeah, so all right, then there's another hypothetical then that I've got, and so an item comes up during the meeting as far as and this one I'm sure you know, that as far as a possible future text amendment or a change in your procedural rules, and it's not on the agenda to take action. Is it okay to discuss it? When can you take action on it? What do you think?
I think you could discuss it, but I don't think you could take action on it because it was not publicized ahead of time.
Okay, these hypotheticals are not near hard enough. Okay. You're right.
I took pre-law.
Ding, 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 correct answer. Yeah. So, it's like, did you look at my notes? I just barely scribbled them on this sticky note. Yeah. Oh, yeah. So how much can you discuss them, though? I mean, can you, or how much should you discuss it? And in order to have it come back on the agenda the way you want it?
I think that's the key, just enough so that it's defined well enough for when it does come back to the agenda.
Right, right. Yeah, not too much that you're maybe overly discussing it, which is for the next meeting, but enough so that staff knows what to put on the agenda to frame it so you can discuss it the next time to have something ready that you could take action on, right? Yeah, I think is a great answer. So what other questions have you planning commissioners had in the past as we've talked about other facets of Open and Public Meetings Act? What else have you had questions about, even if it's some subtle nuance or? Yeah.
So not a question, more of a comment.
Okay.
I appreciate the individuals that we have within our city and how it's been run. A little over a decade ago, I had an opportunity to go to city council of another city and present with my work hat on a presentation to that group. And prior to my presentation, there was a public hearing for a very hotly contested item. I think the entire town turned up. There were probably, maybe not entire town, there were probably 400 people in that room and then spilling out and then outside the building. It was a huge crowd. And I was there for about an hour and a half of public comment before one of the city councilors finally said, you know what, we're not going to, we can't do this today. There's too many of you. We understand. We're going to go ahead and table this conversation. We're not going to make any rules. And everybody left except me and one other guy that was still on the agenda. And just before my presentation, which was the last item on the agenda, they went ahead and acted on that item and passed it, which everybody was against. So just
Yeah.
interesting to see that kind of a thing happen through the process. So I know it does happen. I'm glad that we don't. I will not say which
Wow.
which entity it was.
So clearly that's not the optimal method to act in. Yeah. So, right. Yeah. And no, and that brings up an important point is that another, as planning commission members, council members, others that represent the city, credibility is an important thing, right? And people have a right to believe a statement and that it will follow through. And yeah, obviously nobody should want to lose that credibility or do something that's in any way misleading. But yeah, I'm sure it does happen from time to time. But wow, must have been a lot of public backlash there. So I've got another hypothetical for you. And this one actually did happen before too, I was reminded of it by your mentioning of a really largely attended public hearing. I was working for a local district that provided water services. I was their attorney, and it was a rural area. Normally, regular meetings, we'd have like nobody there, maybe at most one person. If we had a budget meeting, there still would be only two. But for the first time in several years, we updated our impact fees. We had a major study done by a very reputable engineering company and a financial services company, complete new water master plan and impact fee study and so forth. And for a water district, unlike a city, they do one thing, right? They do water. That's all they do. And so if you have something that big and it's not only updated, every 6 to 8 years or something like that, then we anticipated, and it was highly publicized because they wanted to make sure that everybody that wanted to have a chance to show up could. And this particular district was only rate paying. They didn't charge a property tax. Everything came from the rates or impact fees, right? And they anticipated that 200 to 300 people would show up. Well, in the little district building that we had at that time, you could only fit 20 or 30. Even when they did the new one, they probably only fit 50. So what do you think they did? How did they, knowingly wanting to have, normally there would have been at least 100. They publicized the heck out of it, anticipating maybe up to 300. They can't possibly fit them in that building. The normal rule is you have everything at the location, the city hall, or in this case, the district offices. What do you think they did? Because you can't have them come and have them not have a place to sit, right?
I'd hope that they'd find a local school or something with a larger gymnasium-style area that they could hold that particular meeting. I could also see somebody putting out a ticket system, say, hey, take your number, and, okay, number one,
Oh, you're
step up to the
51,
podium.
gee bummer, yeah. So, no, you guys are really reading my mind, because that's what happened. So smack dab next to it almost, really close, within a half mile, there's a elementary school. And so they just had it there. And that elementary auditorium could easily fit, or gymnasium, whatever it was, could easily fit 300 people. And 300 people did show up, and they did have seats. And they were all able to hear what was going on, make comments and whatever. And it worked out really well. So, and, I think they did not just impact fees, but I think they did the rate study too, as far as, the monthly rate that they'd be paying. And it allowed in that format the opportunity for everybody to kind of hear what was going on, because nobody's happy when the rates go up and impact fee for new construction goes up and all those kinds of things. But I think sometimes if people realize, these are the only ways the district gets money, they don't have property tax, here's the good things they've done to keep costs low, this is a rural area, it's spread out. I think people left feeling maybe not 100%, gee, I would have been really happy hearing no increase at all. But then a lot of it was on a new tier system where if somebody wanted to use a little bit, their rates wouldn't go up a lot, but only if they got up into the upper tiers would they pay more. But I think when they realized the options that they were going through, that the options that they eventually picked were probably the best for the community, it turned out well. So,
I have a question
Yeah.
on another matter.
Yeah.
So we've had some hearings in the past where the public either didn't get their notification or for
Right.
whatever reason, and then there's a group that requests another opportunity to present their feelings for the neighborhood. When the meeting has been notified and either or however they didn't get their notification, what's the outcome if you have a whole community requesting another opportunity?
right, and then you have two different ways to look at it, right? There's the legal minimum requirements, which, but then there's practically how do you really give notice? I'm always kind of perplexed by people that show up to the meeting and said they didn't get notice, and it's like, but you're here. So maybe you didn't get the letter in the mail, but maybe your neighbor did and they told you, so one way or another you got indirect notice. But it is something that's, we should be cognizant of, right? But the tough thing about these situations is we've got multiple people's rights that we're balancing, right? We've got the applicant who has the right to move forward, and that's something that's being discussed in the legislature even now, right? With one bill that they have the right to move forward quickly. But then at the same time, the legislature is looking at, but we want to give the public enough time, and so they're thinking of putting a 30-day period in for a subdivision, so it's got to be at least 30 days in advance that the public hearing is noticed. It's tough, right, because you're trying to balance neighboring landowners' rights, applicants' rights, and at some point, you can't give everybody everything they want, right? because it's somebody else is going to lose out. And so, and that's ultimately what you're looking at a lot of times as a planning commission is you're balancing all these landowner rights. But I'd say, I mean, the first look is, did they really get legal notice? And if we can prove with the documentation that we met the legal requirements, then they should be allowed to move forward. I think another way we deal with that issue is under state law, the planning commission has to hold a public hearing. The council doesn't, right? But our city council rules plus city code require that most of these that go to the council, like zone changes, future land use map changes, MDAs. In fact, now with that recent code division, all of those things pretty much that you send to the council automatically have a public hearing. That's, I think, one of our fallback positions. I'm sorry, Mr. or Mrs. nearby resident, that you've missed the application. Obviously, you got it indirectly tonight, but you're going to have another opportunity when it goes to the council. And I think and I've heard you guys doing that before as a planning commission. I think that's a laudable thing to do, is to let people know about their additional public hearing opportunities as well. But I think we have to be careful of having somebody convince you to have another public hearing when we know it's been legally noticed, because the same notion that you mentioned earlier that Commissioner Hatch, that we treat everybody the same, because what if we afford a public hearing in one instance and then the next time around we don't offer it, and then it looks like it's favoritism, right? So I think the only legally defensible standard really is to make sure we've legally noticed it, and if we had, move forward, and then remind people about the council public hearing. That's probably how I'd answer it. But that's all I had for tonight. Thanks.
Let's see, we have 2 minutes. Should take a quick break. Okay, so we are adjourned until 6. All right, we will call to session the February 21st, 2023 Planning Commission of West Jordan meeting. We have Commissioners Wynn, Thomas. This is so bad to remember last names. And Hatch, yes, and Alan present. Commissioners Quinney and Shelton are excused. First item on the agenda, approve the minutes from February 7th, 2023. Any discussion or a motion? Commissioner Hatch.
I'll go ahead and make a motion to approve.
Okay.
And I'll second that motion.
All right. Motion by Commissioner Hatch, second by Commissioner Thomas. All in favor?
Aye.
Any against? Okay, opposed, thank you. Motion carries 4-0. Next business item on the agenda is a continuation of CRS America and Ochre Tire and Service at 5970 West Dannon Way with a recommendation of the Community Development Director regarding a revocation of conditional use permits in an M1 zone. City of West Jordan is the applicant. Mark, we'll turn the time over to you.
All right, thank you, Chairman. So I'm just going to go over this really quick just to refresh everyone's memory, but the site we're looking at is 5970 West Dannon Way. So this has several transportation companies, U-Haul rental companies, and an auto sales and auto repair business. And so, long story short, we found that the site was not in compliance with some of the city code and conditions of approvals. So, so the two conditional use permits are for CRS America, which is vehicle sales, and Ochre Tire and Service, which is auto repair. And so, basically, the most important condition of approval we were looking at was the requirement to keep the vehicles on a paved asphalt or concrete surface. So on January 17th, this was when the Planning Commission last discussed this item, and I won't go into the details of that, but essentially it was decided that we should table the item just to give the applicant more time to bring the site into compliance with all the conditions of approval. And so on February 15th, staff did go out to the site, met the owner there, walked through not only the outside but the inside of the building there, and yeah, everything was looking to be in compliance with the conditions of approval. So you can see here all the vehicles have been moved onto the existing paved surfaces there, the existing asphalt surrounding the building. And then all the vehicles that we looked at, everything was in good working condition. There didn't appear to be any junk or salvage vehicles out there. So, and then this just kind of shows more of the interior of the building. All the cars that are for sale are stored inside. And then all the equipment, tools, materials, everything's kept inside as well. And then as far as the oils and chemicals go, this picture here in the center, this is actually their oil recycling system that they use. So when they're doing oil changes or things like that, they put it in this machine or that storage tank outside, and it actually recirculates to heat the building. So it's kind of a good way to dispose of that. But and then the other thing, the landscaping out on front, everything was looking good condition. So we're not seeing any issues there. So with that, yeah, staff is recommending that the conditional use permits stay intact.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Any questions for staff? Commissioner Thomas?
Yeah, one question. This is for Duncan. On our motion, can we state that they do a periodic check on that property to make sure they maintain those items?
Yes, you could do that. I would refrain from saying exactly how periodic, because obviously that's subject to available staff and budgeting and that kind of thing, but absolutely you can do that.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Commissioner Hatch?
I'd like to thank staff for the additional materials they provided, all of the information on the well. All of that was very helpful for me to go through and just see what we were dealing with, what we were working with. And I also would like to say appreciation to the applicant for going through and making those steps that they needed to come into compliance. And if I'll make a motion
I've got one other comment that I'd like to bring up, related but not directly. I agree. Staff did an amazing job. Appreciate the business owner stepping up, taking care of things. I'm going to use the word fairness, knowing that's inherently a subjective term. My concern is thinking about how this was approached a month ago, and then looking at a few other aspects of it, a few other applications that we've had come through in the past. we put conditions on certain uses, it seems to me that it doesn't get followed through on. And I don't know if there's a specific way that staff does that, or if there's something within a standard operating procedure. I would like to see us, after a use has received condition approval, that there is then a follow-up within a certain period of time thereafter where we can meet again with the business owner and thank them for coming forward and note that there's these conditions that were put forward and we appreciate them meeting those, or what's their timeline on these different things. Something so that it doesn't catch someone cold. All right, it's often a whirlwind process coming in here with the Planning Commission, City Council, anybody that you meet. And so I don't, everybody should be reading through and understanding all of those conditions, but I also don't fault anybody for not seeing them just because it is such a quick process. Is there anything within an existing standard operating procedure where we check on this on a more regular basis?
Yeah, generally, so a lot of the times these conditional use permits come up, either one, they've applied for a business license already and it's gone through staff review and staff is notified that they need to get this additional permit, or it'll come through just as a random counter visit or a call where we inform them, oh, okay, you're planning on doing this business, so you're going to need a conditional use permit, and then they'll apply that way. But generally, with the former situation, we'll hold off on, well, even on the latter situation, we'll hold off on approving the business license until, one, they've applied for the conditional use permit, two, gotten approved, and three, staff has gone out to look and see at least what can be observed to make sure they put in required improvements or things like that.
So do you mean periodic random visits? Is that what you mean more than
I'm
operating procedure?
kind of leaning a little bit toward what Commissioner Thomas said. And I mean, when I say periodic and random, I'm thinking years apart. But what is that? So yes, there would be a first one, just as Mark brought up, they're coming back and getting the building permit or the business permit or whatever that may be. So there's a follow-up there, not necessarily random, but it's triggered by that. But it seems like, I'm going to say this knowing that this is an administrative nightmare to try to track. But if you had something where here's all of the different conditional uses that we've provided on various businesses or properties, and there's just a random check every 3 to 5 years.
Yeah, and I think we've attempted in the past to do that, but then with staff changes, it kind of peters out and people lose, but that certainly is something that, we can start again because we're fully staffed now and, we keep a list. Yeah, we have a complete list of all conditional use permits and so no, we'll start doing that again. It's an excellent idea. I think we used to do it yearly. We look at everything yearly. That becomes a little bit onerous. I think Jay is a former fireman. You understand how onerous that becomes because you think, oh, well, we'll go out yearly, but then the sheer volume is, and then plus you have other work to do. So no, that's something that will reinvigorate. I'll put it that way.
I think that would be a great step forward in helping with individuals coming in and maybe being surprised. So, sorry, Commissioner Hatch, I'll turn the time back over to you.
You are the chair. You get to determine this. Based on the information and findings set forth in the staff report and upon the evidence and explanations received today concerning compliance with the conditions of approval, I move that the Planning Commission recommend that the Community Development Director not revoke the conditional use permits for CRS America and Oker Tire and Service located at 5970 West Dannon Way in an M1 zone with the conditional permit of being randomly checked periodically. I guess that's kind of double. Being checked periodically for compliance.
Second. Okay, we've got a motion from Commissioner Hatch, a second from Commissioner Wynn. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries 4-0. Thank you for coming in. All right, on to our first public hearing for the evening. We have Aloha Salt Lake Tattoos at 7114 South Redwood Road. Conditional use permit for tattoo and body engraving service in an SC2 RWO zone. With Aloha Salt Lake Tattoos, Luke Jensen and Jesse Payne applicants. We will turn the time over first to Mark, and then we will, oh, I'm sorry, we're going to the applicant first. All right, if you would, either of you or both of you would like to come up to the podium, I'll give you an opportunity to explain a little bit about what you're about, present your application. You'll push the button on the right. And speak into the mic. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. I appreciate you guys. Thank you for your time. Myself, I'm Luke Jensen, and this is my business partner, Jesse Payne. Yeah, we're just here to present our proposal for a conditional use permit for our business. We have a slide presented. If we go over that, I'm not sure the process or how we do that, and we can go and kind of read off of that. So we established business in 2015. We opened up our first shop in Murray. Then in 2020, we opened our second location in Main Street in Park City. We are the first and only location up there. This year, we would like to open up our third location in West Jordan, making us the only tattoo shop in Utah with 3 locations. Each year, we've had a steady increase in revenue as well as long-term customers. We attribute this to our strong customer relationships, clean and professional environment, and our award-winning tattoos. This is why we were voted Best Tattoo Shop in Utah by City Weekly in 2019 and then again in 2021. And we also had 2 of our artists who were voted Best Artists in Utah those years as well. The next slide is, this is our Park City location. We took a lot of time in the development and in the build out of this location, just to kind of make a standpoint. It was something that we had finally garnished enough money up for, and we wanted to make it a staple point for Park City Main Street, as well as for ourselves and our customers. Just a good, beautiful place to kind of come and enjoy the experience at. And then the growth that we spoke about earlier is during the last 3 years, even through COVID, Aloha's gross sales have increased from $230,000 with 1,400 clients serviced to $1.2 million in gross sales last year with 5,100 clients serviced. And then a lot of the reason we are successful is because of our practices and how we approach this industry. We're a fully disposable shop. This means that the equipment we use to perform each tattoo is only used once. Then it is sent off in biohazard containers to be destroyed. We feel this is the best way to ensure our customers a completely sanitary tattoo. We also ensure that each artist we hire gets properly trained in first aid as well as receives bloodborne pathogen certifications to ensure our self-safety and as well as our patrons. In some of our locations, they don't require, in some cities, they don't require some of these certifications. We always do. We think it's better if you understand that part of the practice, for sure. Another thing that we're really big on is we're very, very selective with the artists that we hire to represent our brand. All of our artists have extensive training in sterilization and cross-contamination, as well as extensive art backgrounds that help us create some of the best tattoos in Utah. Here's just a couple reviews and some examples of the artwork that we do. Definitely not kind of run-of-the-mill. It's all very tasteful work that we do. We have long-term clients that come for years and years and continue to come with generations of families and stuff. And then just some reviews. Obviously, through the years, you get good ones, you get bad ones. We've had a tendency to stay on the good side of reviews and everything, and we try to approach every review as an opportunity to learn and grow. So it's definitely something that we're very prideful of, is how we're reviewed, and even the good reviews, the bad reviews, it's all helpful. So we all take it and learn. And then just to conclude, with happy clients and exceptional art base and our proven track record with growth and the drive to excel in an industry, we think bringing the Aloha experience to West Jordan would be great for everybody involved. I think that's all we have.
Thank you. If you were to hazard a guess, or maybe you've already crunched the numbers, between the Murray and Park City, are you seeing, or do you hear a lot of people coming in from the west side of the valley, coming to your locations?
Yeah, and especially with the growth out southwest in Daybreak and Harriman and things like that. So we have a lot of people that travel all the way through. That was kind of the reason for Park City as well. We noticed that we were tapping into a lot of Heber and Colville. So we definitely wanted to give people an opportunity to get that experience and not travel, an hour and a half or even further. I mean, we do have clients that travel by plane and they come in yearly and things like that. And we accommodate them very well. But for our locals, yeah, we like to pick areas in which we feel like it's a good demographic for us and where we feel like it's a good station for kind of people to travel to for sure.
Well, I appreciate the presentation. Any questions for the applicant?
That was very well done.
I'd like to say that impressive growth too, and great presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. We appreciate that.
All right, we'll go ahead and turn the time over to Mark.
Right, thank you, Chairman. So just a little bit for context, this tattoo shop is going to be located within the Redwood Village Shopping Center, which is on the corner of Redwood Road and 7000 South. So this shopping center is in an SC2 zone and also happens to be in the Redwood Road overlay. So as far as tattoo shops go, they're not allowed in an SC2, but they are allowed in the Redwood Road overlay zone. And in order for a property to qualify for the Redwood Road overlay, it has to have frontage on Redwood Road. Now, you can kind of see here on this map, the site is located on a landlocked it's kind of a landlocked parcel, but it's kind of tucked back a ways there from Redwood Road. But both that parcel and the larger parcel for the entire shopping center are all under common ownership. And so under city code, they can actually be considered to be the same site for the purposes of that. So that's why we're considering this a part of the Redwood Road overlay. So some of the surrounding areas, again, as you can see, is all commercial really to the north, to the east, and to the south. You've got the rest of the shopping center there, and then Deseret Industries to the south. And then to the west is a single-family residential neighborhood, which the nearest home to the business is going to be about 250 feet away from the building, or from the back of the building. And in between that, you've got a local road, landscape buffer, a masonry wall, and a rear parking lot. So we feel there's pretty good buffer there. And as far as impacts go, there's really not a whole lot. This really doesn't generate much more impact than a barber shop. There's no noise, there's no odors, no smoke, no dust. So we're really not recommending any conditions of approval per se, other than a couple administrative requirements of approval. So, parking's looking good. Again, this is in the middle of a shopping center, so that entire large parking lot is all shared. They're going to need a minimum of 8 spaces, but with the number of employees, with 8 employees plus customer for each, you're looking at about 16 needed spaces. But even given that, we did a parking study for the whole complex, and they've got a surplus of 33 spaces, so they're looking good on that. But anyway, with that being said, staff is recommending approval of the conditional use permit, and I can answer any questions you might have.
Just maybe by way of clarification, this threw me for a loop when I was going through this packet at home. That should be 7,000 South, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, I think I said 7000 South, but maybe I was wrong.
Well, no, it says 7,800
It's just
South on
easier
the
to say
drawing.
70th.
Right. The map shows 7,800 South.
Oh, does it? Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
But,
no, that is 7000 South.
any questions for staff? All right, well, this is notioned as a public hearing, so we will turn the time over to the public. You'll have 3 minutes to speak. If you're here in the audience, feel free to come up to the podium, state your name for the record. Do we have anybody online? Okay, so if there were people online, we'd tell them to push *6 after they've been called on, but we'll go ahead and turn the time over to you. All right, well, seeing no public interested in speaking on this particular item, we'll go ahead and close the public hearing and bring it back to the Planning Commission for further discussion or a motion. Oh, I'm sorry, Duncan, go ahead.
Yeah, so just with, like with any conditional use, even though staff has recommended that no conditions because they don't see any detrimental effects, still, if you have a discussion on the record as a planning commission even if it's just to reach that same conclusion, I think that's helpful for our record, so.
Commissioner Thomas?
And I'll make a comment. I think it's a good fit for that shopping center in that area. I did have one quick question for the applicant, which just came. How many artists do you have at that shop?
We have 8.
8?
3 apprentices who are.
Okay. So you'll have basically 8 booths set up then?
Exactly.
Okay. When I was going through the packet, I was having a hard time figuring out that, but thank you. But again, like I said, I think this is a good fit for that shopping area, and I see no problems with moving forward on it.
Any thoughts on detrimental effects that Duncan brought up? Commissioner Wynn?
I don't, I don't see any detrimental effects, and I also think that all the criteria are met. Shall I make a motion?
Feel free, sir.
Based on the information and findings set forth in the staff report and upon the evidence and explanations received today, I move that the Planning Commission approve the conditional use permit for a tattoo and body engraving service for Aloha Salt Lake Tattoo located at 7114 South Redwood Road in an SC2 zone and the Redwood Road overlay with the city code requirements listed on page 2 of the staff report.
All right, Commissioner Thomas?
And I'll second that motion.
All right, motion by Commissioner Wynn, second by Commissioner Thomas. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 4-0. Thank you for choosing West Jordan. We're excited to see you open up your location. All right, next item on the public hearing, we have the Hidden Cove subdivision at 7106 South, 2200 West, preliminary subdivision plat for 21 lots on 7.1 acres in an R18C zone with Paxton Guymon applicants and Taylor handling this for staff. But we are asking the applicant to come up first, so podium is yours, sir.
Thank you, members of the Planning Commission. Appreciate the chance. I'll be brief in my comments. You might recall we've brought this project through the process a few times during the rezoning, and the different parcels that we've assembled were acquired at different times, which required us to go through 2 different rezoning processes. Needless to say, we now have all 3 parcels assembled. All 3 have the same zoning, R18. As you know, that allows for minimum lot sizes of 8,000 square feet. If you look at our plat, very few are at that level, they're larger. And we wanted to have some larger lots, and the design that we've come up with is by far the most functional. I think staff has spent a lot of time reviewing this with us. By the way, you have very qualified staff. It's refreshing. I do a lot of work in a lot of cities, and your staff, from planning to engineering, are great. Maybe too good, because we've had to come back with a few more red line edits than I thought, but I think we finally got it right. Needless to say, despite there being a little over 7 acres, which with R18 zoning you would think might yield 28 or more lots, the way this layout works, it's only 21 lots. So it's a much less dense, much less intense use than the zoning would allow, but it provides for a very functional layout, and we think this is the best use, even at the, sacrificing some lot count. You'll see there are some detention basins. We have everything lined up for a canal crossing. This does cross the South Jordan Canal. You'll see where that's connecting the east and the west parcels. This will be a huge improvement over the bridge that's there now. It's a very old, narrow, unsafe, I would suggest, bridge. So this is going to be a great improvement. To the south of this subdivision, you have Mill Helen Way, which was installed I want to say 2 decades ago, and it was stubbed to the southern boundary of our property for this very purpose, to eventually provide the connectivity that this subdivision needs. So it's been a lot of work to assemble the land, get the rezoning, get everything together, but we're proud to present this plat to you for consideration tonight. And I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Commissioners, any questions for the applicant? All right, appreciate it. We'll go ahead and turn the time over to Taylor.
Great, thank you, Chair and Planning Commission. I'll try not to tread over everything that Paxton just said, so I'll go quick. But as mentioned, 21 single-family lots, 2 detention parcels, just over 7 acres. It is an R18 zone, and they do comply with all of the development standards of that R18 zone. Here we can see the zoning map matches the zoning map and the future land use. The subdivision, as he indicated, is here. Originally, the first time I saw this, I think we had 22 lots, but working through some of the engineering and the geotech did require us to remove one of those lots to have a bigger detention basin to make sure that we didn't have any flooding on any of the neighboring lots. This is also, as he mentioned, a big improvement, not only for the bridge, but it will connect Mel Helen Way, which will allow a second fire access to that neighborhood. Currently, there are 3 streets, Johnston Way, Mel Helen Way, and Henry Alice Court, all of which only have a single fire access. So this will allow a second fire emergency access, which will greatly improve the response times and safety of the homeowners in those locations. This graphic was included in your staff report, so we won't spend a lot of time on it, but just showing how it is consistent with the neighboring development on all 4 sides. And we are recommending approval with the 4 conditions which you saw in your staff report. These are typically things that would be addressed during the final subdivision plat. But we just wanted to bring them up here because some of the drainage issues we typically wouldn't see with a lot. So we just wanted to call those out here additionally. But with that, staff's happy to answer any questions you might have.
Could you go back to the subdivision plat, the proposed plat? For lot 120 with the existing house, and recognizing it's an existing house, I can't imagine that actually meets setback requirements. Are they going to have essentially a grandfather for that despite it being a brand new lot?
That's exactly correct.
Okay. And I mean, I guess it's grandfather, so it's not a whole lot that we're going to do about it, but I'm concerned about flooding from the canal and the proximity of the house to the canal for any maintenance or other activities. Have we, anything we've heard from South Jordan Canal, or do we even need to worry about communicating with them on this?
So we've been in contact with South Jordan Canal throughout this process, specifically because of the bridge. They're actually going to dedicate that property to us, and then we're going to grant them an easement back over it. But through that entire process, they haven't indicated any concerns with that. They've been able to maintain this for, the house is fairly old, so they've been able to maintain that for decades without any problems, and they haven't foreseen any additional problems.
So the location of the house isn't changing with the subdivision, so it's not going to be affected any more than it has for the last 60 years. And I believe at one time the property line is actually in the center of the canal, so technically it would meet setback, other than it's kind of a watery setback, but it's, so.
There's also a pretty big buffer of land between the bank of the canal and the eastern side of the house, separated by a cement wall.
For the record, I'll just say what that is for Julie, who's taking notes, that the applicant indicated that there is quite a large buffer of land between where the house sits and the waterway for the canal.
Thank you for doing that. Any questions for staff? Or, yes, for staff from the commission? All right, well, sorry, go ahead, Commissioner Hatch.
And I might be making something out of nothing. Can you go back to the conditions of, or the conditions that were in that list? So explain number 4 to me.
Yeah, the reason for that is we've got one geotech report for this subdivision already, but we are going to require that to be updated or have an additional one just because it was taken when there wasn't water in the canal. We don't anticipate that's going to cause any concerns. We just wanted to have that in there, that if the geotech did highlight something, that we would address it at that point. But we're not concerned that it's going to, but if it does.
Thank you, that helps. Appreciate that.
All right, this has been noticed as a public hearing, so we will, just the same as last one, open this up to the public. You can step up to the podium and have 3 minutes to provide public comment. Has anybody joined online, Julie? All right, so we're just to the locals here. So state your name for the record. It's already on, so you can just walk up and start talking into the
Okay.
mic.
We live on the one side of, and we've loved that field all these years, and the animals that have been there, and the cats and the dogs and the birds. It's been really wonderful to have it there. And we look forward to it being built into a very nice living area for people too. One question I have is, all of the homes already have fences that we've taken a lot of time and effort and money to get them put in. Will there be double fences? Will there be a space between our fence and then fence that may be put in for the new homes? Does anyone have anything to say about that?
Those are questions that would be answered after the public comment.
Okay, all right, and I can talk to him. Okay, thanks.
Could you state your name for the record as well?
Cora Jakowski.
Cora Jakowski. Did you get that? All right. Any additional public comment?
I'm Sonny Jakowski. I'm Cora's husband. We live together right behind that subdivision. I've talked to Paxton a number of times. I tried to stay on top of what's going on. There was a mention of the existing residents there, and I didn't catch what the answer is, because right now it's not a single-family resident. It's rented out. It's an apartment complex. How is that going to be handled? Will that,
We'll have to address it after the public comment.
okay. And I guess that I'll talk to Paxton regarding the timetable, where they're at. We've been kind of watching this, but that was, that's my question.
Okay.
And concern. Okay.
Thank you. Any additional comments? All right, seeing none, we'll close the public hearing and bring this back for further discussion. I would like to address these two questions from the Jakowski, right? Did I get that right? Jakowski. Okay. One regarding the fences, and second regarding existing residents. I have an idea about the answer, but maybe rather than just spout something off, I would like to maybe seek a motion to allow Paxton to come up and
I'll make that motion.
answer. Okay.
I'll second.
Motion by Commissioner Thomas, second from Commissioner Hatch. If you wouldn't mind answering those two questions for us.
Is that on now?
Yes.
There we go. So the first question dealt with fencing, and as this works, we're not going to disturb any of the fencing that they have put up. There's no intention there to disturb that. To the extent we cause any damage to the fencing during the development process or the home building process, we acknowledge, and I'll state on the record, we know that's our responsibility to fix. So I don't want there to be any concerns. As far as double fencing, when people buy a lot, if they choose to use a different builder or to use our builder, they do have the right to put up their own fencing, and we'll make sure that it's either on or within the property line. That's something that we take seriously. Some people do like to put up their own separate fencing, and even though there's an existing fence there. So I think that's going to be determined more on a lot-by-lot basis. If people have pets and they want to have a certain kind of fence put up to make sure they can keep their dogs in their backyard or something, we're not going to prohibit that. That's all I can say as far as the fencing issue. On the existing residential structure there, it's true that we have a basement entrance into the basement, and we intend to fully comply with the zoning ordinances. So if there's any concern. I can tell you that the upstairs, people living upstairs and the people living in the basement are related, they're family members. I think it qualifies as an accessory dwelling unit under that standard, but if it doesn't, we will do whatever needs to happen to comply. I'll just share with you an idea that I have, which is as we are growing up and we have kids coming into this age where they want to buy homes, it's incredibly expensive. And it's very challenging for the younger generation to get into any sort of living arrangements outside of apartments. And one of the goals we have is to build some homes here that are designed to allow a married older couple to have their own children live in the basement, something like that. And so we are very sensitive to the inflation that has occurred in housing and trying to come up with sensible solutions. There's a market need for that we hope to hit. So that's the answer.
If I could maybe just restate what I heard.
Sure, please.
Everything with the 21 new lots that go in, or whatever the final number ends up being once we get through the geotechnical studies and whatnot, will all be in compliance with existing city codes. And
Correct.
Is there an HOA associated with this?
There's not yet. We're going to have to form an HOA to maintain most likely some private amenities. But we want to keep that to a minimum. My experience with HOAs is that they can lead to problems. And where we have publicly dedicated streets, I don't know that we need to go very far with an HOA. Maybe just some basic architectural standards for the homes itself, and that's about it.
So the reason I asked that in particular, my experience with HOAs is very similar, but they also tend to want a unique look around the entire development, and that would usually trigger, well, they're going to put up a new fence around the entire, and so you do end up with the double fences. It sounds like the way that you're hoping to set this up will allow each lot owner to work with their neighbors and decide whether they're just going to use the existing fence, put up their own fence, or maybe the two of them go in and replace the fence together.
Correct.
But it gives them options and opportunities. The second one was the home, same situation with the dual use. These will all be within existing legal city ordinances, city code. If it is an accessory dwelling unit, they'll have the appropriate paperwork for that kind of a thing, and so it would just be resolved through that means.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Commissioners, any further questions? Commissioner Thomas?
I just want to make one comment, and that's for the couple back there that is currently living adjoining that. Just keep in touch with the developer. In my experience with developing or working with some developers on some even projects by my home, the closer you would work with the developer, I think the better off you're going to be, and you'll get probably the questions and the items that you want. So that's just my suggestion.
And by the way, they've been great about that. Sonny Jakowski, he's come to my office. We've had good discussions.
Great.
He's
I noticed when
he's a
the
respectful gentleman.
existing homeowners and the developers work together, you get a lot better product out of it.
Yeah.
All right, appreciate your time. Commissioners, any further comments or a motion?
I have a question. Refresh my memory on ADUs, minimum lot size.
So for internal ADU, it can be in any of our single-family zones. If it was detached, it would have to be an R110, so it can't
Okay,
be detached
that was
from this
R110,
location.
that's where I was going with. Okay, thank you.
All right.
I'll go ahead and make a motion. All right, I move that the Planning Commission approve the preliminary major subdivision for Hidden Cove, 21 lots on approximately 7.1 acres located at 7106 South, 2200 West, with the requirements of approval listed in this report and the following conditions of approval.
Commissioner Thomas?
I'll second that motion.
All right, we've got a motion from Commissioner Hatch, a second by Commissioner Thomas. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 4-0. Okay, all right, that concludes our agenda for today.
I'll make a motion that we adjourn.
Commissioner Thomas has motioned to adjourn. We are adjourned.
Good to see you.
Recording stopped.
The reason she brought that up is some of those There's still some corrugated pipe in the ground.